This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the MtG Cabal cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptar. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at MtG Cabal Cast and YouTube.
All right, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast. This week, kind of a broad strokes topic and something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think of. So TCG basically just issued update, article, Magic.TCGPlayer is dead, long live Magic.TCGPlayer from Peter Day. And it's basically talking about how they're going to change the way their articles, their website works, and after the Star City redesign last year and what a debacle that was. Figured we'd talk a little bit about how interface changes like that actually can have an effect on MTG Finance, as well as a little bit of a supply issue update. Obviously, some products were delayed about a month ago. We had Commander Spellbook Green, or whatever they're calling it.
Yep.
Oracle of Moldiah reprint box got delayed till December. But we're going to be touching on those things. We'll get started with the supply issues first, and with that, we'll get it taken away.
Yep. So this supply issue thing is actually twofold, because we not only have Magic supply being delayed, we actually have physical card supplies being delayed, and we're finally really starting to kind of see that take place. If anybody's ordered cards off TCGPlayer in the last, I'd say, 4 to 8 weeks, there's a really good chance that a lot of what you have received has just been packaged as best as possible without top loaders, because nobody's getting PVC, essentially. It's very difficult to make a product that small. PVC pipe and other home essentials you can still get, but something malleable like that, not so much. So there's this kind of awkward space in the finance world right now where people are just taking a gamble.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody's shut down, but I've seen a lot of people attempt to buy supply at a much more inflated number than they would normally, just to be able to sell properly on TCGPlayer. Not really big in the finance world overall, although it does add an additional level of questionableness to how you're going to be sending your cards out. Personally, if I didn't have the backstock of top loaders I've been able to pick up over the years, I probably wouldn't be selling at all right now, just because I don't want to lose anything to USPS and their distinct inability to follow the do not machine or do not bend instructions.
Yeah.
So, again, not really top level in regards to finance. The supply chain issue, however, with Magic product is much more relevant to this. We're getting double masters now. How much we get now, how much we're going to get in a couple of months for a restock wave, we're unsure of. And that Commander Green product, as Mark Rosewater said, it was just kind of delayed without an inability to respond. This is it. This is all they have. This is what they get, essentially, as WotC. There's nothing they can do about this. And
it's worth noting, too, in addition to the delays that I think we're inevitably going to see with double masters, Jumpstart still has not had its second wave hit some of the larger vendors. So there's still people waiting on pre-orders for boxes, which this has a pretty big effect, because if you go right now and you look at Branching Evolution, which was a card I had pegged that would be below $10, I think the cheapest one is $30 or $40 right now.
Yeah, it's still somewhere floating around there.
And we still haven't gotten a second wave. Well, I'm pretty sure by the time Double Masters comes out, people will have moved on from Jumpstart. So Mero can say it's a print at will product all he wants to. He still has to sell. That product still has to sell.
Yes.
In order for, LGSs to keep bringing more in to get more supply out there. And with paper shut down again until at least September, there's not a big chance that you're going to see it.
Yeah.
So,
and they have to attempt to weave attempted to weave in second waves based on almost entirely pre-orders. They couldn't just go to the printer and say, okay, spin it up again, because they have to be printing the rest of the stuff. If Commander Green is delayed until December, there's a really good chance that at this point, that's what's in print right now. Or it will be in print. Because they had to delay Ikoria. At some point, they had to print Zendikar. Remember, that set's coming out in like a month and a half.
Yeah, something
right now.
Like that, and we've got double masters in between that.
Yeah.
So
all this stuff had to have been printed already.
And you've got this perfect storm of, which we harped on earlier, was in previous episodes, you've got month, and every single month there's release.
Yeah.
And, combine the product delays and everything with that, and all of a sudden these every month releases are suddenly some of the scarcest product you will see in Magic in the past few years.
Oh yeah.
Because print runs have exploded, but right now that's just not possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to have, a pretty sizable effect. And then to touch back on the top loader issue, there's LGSs that are basically paying 5 cents for top loaders from people to bring them in.
Mm-hmm.
And ordering singles right now can be kind of a crapshoot, like you touched on. It could show up bent in half, it could show up wrinkled, whatever. There's all these things that are going wrong now just because of something seemingly so small. So for me, I'd be a little bit more wary ordering like a UC or something off TCGPlayer, because if I'm going to spend that much, I want it to be like done.
Yeah, you want insurance that's going to get to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In good condition, and that's just not there. Sure, there's Facebook groups where people have posted. I've seen pictures and, some of the group chats I'm in of people getting packages that are like cardboard taped together with a team bag and a card and a penny sleeve taped to the cardboard, and they're hoping that just gets there okay. So it's interesting to see, and I think that the supply issue, is a pretty big deal, especially with what they've announced now with Zendikar, where we have a new type of booster coming. We have draft boosters, collector's boosters, normal boosters. I don't know, too many products.
Yeah, it sounded like if WotC was going to create a product catalog, they took collector's boosters and draft boosters, what we have known all along as a regular booster, and then crafted 8 products from 2. And it seems like there's just going to be some interweaving of additional items with them to create from 2 8 products. Because you can buy like your booster box, you can buy an individual pack, you can buy some blisters, and like it's just kind of a lot of smoke and mirrors to inflate SKU numbers.
Yeah. And it's interesting that they've chosen to do this in a time where there's already product shortages.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, we're starting to feel a crunch on it now. I think especially as Doubles Masters hits, which people are pretty much over the issues of supply for Jumpstart now, whatever, who cares? Mm-hmm. And we'll see what happens, because Double Masters has not exactly been a popular set with some of the more casual players, saying that VIP packs and everything are, whatever. Product's going to sell. It's just going to be interesting to see how upset people get when they can't get the cards at all.
Yeah.
Because part of the excitement over releases like Jumpstart and Double Masters and Commander is you'll get some high-value reprints that get priced down. Well, if the supply's not there, suddenly those singles aren't worth as much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably worth taking a look at something like Sword of Fire and Ice, which was just announced as a reprint with absolutely gorgeous art.
Yeah, both art for that card are way better than the Invention art, at least, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Same with War and Peace.
Yeah. And seeing what happens to the price on these cards as these reprints get announced, because, frankly, I think if you can, low on Fire and Ice from Darksteel is like 50 right now, and that's the least popular version or whatever. If you can get it for 30 to 40, I think that's worth it because of the supply issues. So this is a big opportunity for people to try to jump on some of that stuff as well.
The idea of buying into sealed for Double Masters based on the presumed shortage, it isn't a bad idea at all. Right now, we're kind of in the last throes of spoiler season for this, and if you are able to get your box around 300 to 310, so basically Amazon pricing, the breakdown of just rares and mythics that were announced as of the time of recording this podcast was about an EV of $370 on the box, somewhere in there. So even if and we were at about, I think, 67% of the mythics spoiled and very close to 70% of the rares. So it would be very unlikely that everything else that gets spoiled in those 2 slots would drop the box to what is effectively MSRP, because Amazon is handling this set. So you have to match Amazon. You have to price to Amazon. Otherwise, you'll lose to Amazon. That holding sealed for some amount of time is not a bad idea. But overall, because of the disparity in prices across the rares and the mythics, if you were only looking for a handful of cards, you weren't just looking to flip product in the short, or it might be an extended window where you can do this. If you weren't just looking to crack and flip singles you don't need, buying into singles might actually be the way to go, because there will be a glut at the beginning. There are going to be a lot of vendors just opening this product to sell immediately. There are going to be people who actually did buy it to draft, etc., and getting in on cards like Fire and Ice and Crypt, Force of Will, Mana Reflections, which just spoiled this morning. Those kinds of cards, when they drop immediately, will eventually, or should eventually, rebound to some degree. And getting in at this new floor is going to be the way to go. Look at Blightsteel Colossus. That card was spoiled. The Mirrodin Besieged version dropped from 90 to, I think it's 40 or 50, and all it has done since then is climb.
Yep.
That's it. That card has done nothing but climb. And the same thing with Doubling Season. Doubling Season did recover a bit. I don't think the Battle Bond version has recovered fully, but the Ravnica version, because it's unique art, has.
Yeah.
It's definitely come back. The other thing that a lot of people aren't talking about is, and I don't think a lot of people have really put a lot of thought into this, because there's just this swarm of information coming at us from WotC about these products, and this year is busy as hell. We don't have a roadmap for 2021 yet in regards to product. We're coming up very close to a point in time where a year ago we knew everything that was coming out in regards to major sets and names, themes, and we knew about the Commander draft set, because that was the big thing, and maybe green at this point. We do not have a 2021 roadmap, and what wouldn't surprise me is WotC trying to catch up to supply issues by halting any additional supplemental products they had for 2021 that wasn't another master set, not another heater, and try and refill Jumpstart and refill double masters in that time period, because Carta can only print so much while they're down, and they are in Texas, which is open to some degree. But if Texas closes down again, then everything stops.
Yep.
Which is a very real thing, and not a lot of things people want to talk about right now. So this does play into finance as a whole, and should factor into your projections for: do you want to hold sealed? Do you want to hold singles? What is the play for double masters? Is this going to be the kind of product that you can just crack and flip? In the first couple of weeks, or not? This is something you need to be very cognizant of and make your choice appropriately. Personally, I think I might pick up a few singles for play, but otherwise, this set as a whole, it doesn't seem like a trap to me. But it just seems like flipping singles for me would be the way to go.
Yeah, and I think that's long term probably the better way to do it, because granted,
I don't need more Death Shadows.
Yeah.
End of the day, I don't need more Death Shadows, and I don't need Basalt Monoliths that aren't in foil. I don't need more Fatal Pushes, even Box Toppers. There's a lot of stuff in this set that I think might be fairly immovable moving forward, especially if Modern doesn't cut over to Arena. If Modern doesn't cut over to Arena, what are those Tron lands worth? They are not good in EDH. Fatal Push is okay at best in EDH.
Yeah.
Map is like the only card thus far, the only uncommon or common that I would be happy opening as a box topper. Not even Greaves, because there's an F&M promo that's worth more. The set foil, the original set foil Greaves, might actually be worth more than the box topper, just because while it is not unique art, that art has been used across Commander. It's from Mirrodin, and that border in foil is really weird, and it has this kind of niche spot in the market. And I would not be surprised if the box topper was actually the cheapest version in foil of Lightning Greaves.
Yeah.
I am not amused by a lot of this craft.
I think it's also, and again, for me, I think singles is the way to go, because the liquidity is a lot better, and I don't want to sit on a product that, like you said, they haven't really announced what's the roadmap is for next year, and it was late July, early August that we got it last year. And as long as we don't have that map, they still do have that option to just say, hey, we're going to spend the first quarter of the year pumping out a bunch of product that we're catching up on, because we want to make sure this stuff sells, because we want it in our players' hands. And, I mean, hell, they could say, hey, LGSs, you know what? A bunch of places went back on lockdown. Here's a bunch of Double Masters. Here's a bunch of Jumpstart, all for free. Yeah. Just like they did with the mystery boosters, to try to help those stores keep afloat while they're struggling with everything.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So it's going to be interesting, I think. But I think that by and large, it's not looking great.
No. What I'll do is I'll attach the Google Drive link that is being maintained by MTG Goldfish that lists out all the mythics, rares, the dollar value of each as of the moment they were spoiled, and then the estimated value for the box, assuming that nothing else that has been spoiled has a value, meaning if spoiling stopped now and the set was only the cards that were spoiled, this is the value of the box. That number is about 370. And there is an additional valuation, and this is the one I like the most because a lot of the industry forgets this. If you were to take the set right now and keep it as large as it actually is, but zero out the value of the rest of those cards, what is that box worth? It is worth about $260 right now. That is, as of last week, $40 below Amazon value. So you are operating at a loss if nothing else in the set held value. And you just opened, Hill Giants and the rest of the slots. So
It's probably what it's going to be.
I mean, most likely. But this is actually, like, the calculations on this are actually really nice because, like I said, that second valuation isn't done a lot. As an analyst, you're not trained to do that for your client, but as an external vendor, you can and you should. And this is something that I forgot about until I saw it today, so it is very, very much worthwhile. And let me add that to my notes for this week. And then we had the thrilling penultimate conclusion of the MTG Players Tour this week that started out kind of interesting, but that ended the exact way we thought it would, a Brian Kibler joke. So we went into this weekend, and I'll bring this up real quick, with the breakdown that looks as such, a 40% Teamer Rec field, which looks a little overbearing, but on coverage they talked about this before. When you look at, and they chose Cons block because this was one of the easiest parallels, when you had some very oppressive cards in 3 colors, you walked into that Pro Tour, the Cons of Tarkir Standard, not the Block Pro Tour, and about the same percentage of the field was on some form of Abzan, either control or mid-range, and the rest of the field was smattered across aggro and control and all this other stuff. But Abzan, while the story of that Pro Tour, because it was the highest percentage deck, was not the most winning deck like Reclamation was. All the other decks could operate in the field and play specifically. You didn't have Abzan kind of fold in on itself and try and beat the decks that were attempting to beat the best Abzan deck like you have right now. There's 3-color Teamer Rec, and there's 4-color Teamer Rec splashing white for Teferi, which is basically meant to go up against just Teamer Rec, and then you have the monocolor aggro decks and a few other things like the Esper mid-range deck that was brought to beat the decks that were meant to beat Teamer Rec in an attempt to kind of level up the field.
Yeah. And it's worth noting, too, that I think this is more indicative, again, of design space issues than anything else. Because, like you said, while Abzan existed in that, and everyone knew that Abzan was the boogeyman of the format, it wasn't as oppressive as Reclamation is in the current standard.
Nope.
There was, I think, like I'd mentioned last week, all these articles that said, how did the best non-Growth Spiral deck? Well, Growth Spiral is, yes, in all of these decks, but the two of them together, I think, are the problem. And I think that this is when you're going to have to see, as we touched on last week, talking about how things on Arena with this new ladder might get a little bit more homogenized. This is the type of thing where, I have to think something's going to get banned out of this. And it's what's going to be well positioned. So financially, what are you going to move in on?
Yeah.
And I love that the good buddy Murderous Rider made an appearance in the top 8, even if it was just one of them.
Oh yeah, I'll bring up that list real quick.
Yeah, the mono black list, which is just a really efficient aggro deck. That to me was the most interesting thing I saw all weekend, besides, at least in the top 8, besides the Esper lists that I thought were incredible. And if you haven't ever been to mtgazone.com, it is one of the best sites for just broad strokes analysis of what's going on in the high-level competitive metagame. And they touched on the Esper deck that a lot of the Japanese pros brought that curved out with Hallowblade, Regisaur, and Sphinx. And I love Sphinx of Foresight. So just having stuff like that you can curve into was pretty sweet, I thought. But
yeah, they talked about it on stream, and I did not see it, which was a shame because I thought that matchup would have been a little more interesting than what we got for the majority of the weekend. But
mirror matches.
Yep. Or To be fair, eventually, toward like midway through day 2, when Raph Levy was operating on like 2 hours sleep, they started featuring him on Azor Control, so that was a little more interesting.
That was great. But I think it's, again, financially not a whole lot. It's more of the same. Reclamation and Growth Spiral and Uro are still the problem. You just got Shark Typhoon as another finisher. So it just got better.
Yeah, I think one of the important takeaways from Rec is that the core of this deck is going to be good no matter where it falls in any given format, because this does port straight down into Pioneer. There's nothing in this deck that you can't play. It's just Pioneer is a little more aggressive in regards to its combo kill turns than Temur Rec has the ability to function on. But that doesn't mean that a deck like Temur Rec can't be ported into Pioneer with a handful of upgrades in later sets as WotC pushes the power level of certain things, or actually decides that they want to support Pioneer and start cutting the legs out from Inverter or Lotus Breach, etc. Right now in 4-color Rec, Teferi Time Reveler is basically being propped up by Standard. Once that card rotates out, that should be an easy pickup because it exists in Modern, and I think that's it afterwards.
Yeah.
It's just like unlike Big Teferi, I should say, who does a little more in EDH, Small Teferi doesn't do a whole lot there and isn't doing a whole lot elsewhere. That's not a bad card to pick up. Uro is going to be Uro afterwards and just kind of slide into the Bant Ramp deck, which already has a finisher in Ugin, so it'll just be reworked. I think the next 2 best places to look are going to be Wilderness Rec. As that rotates out, it's going to drop a little bit and then pick up because that still functions really well in EDH. It's not quite Seedborn Muse, but it's close. Yeah. And having another approximation and something that's a little sturdier in an enchantment versus a creature is always something to keep your eye on. I still have a bunch of them from when I bought in at a quarter each, and I'm going to ride it till the end of time. And then Expansion Explosion, again, another Pioneer card that can make it, and it functions extremely well in EDH because it is not effectively, it literally is a split card, and then again in Pioneer or anything else silly that happens later on. I mentioned Thousand Year Storm a couple months ago as a pick, and that's gone up because of EDH. And Expansion Explosion plays really well with that card because you can just expand something that you've already casted ahead of time. Your High Tide combo doesn't have to happen 4 or 5 spells into Thousand Year Storm. You could be turn like spell 3, High Tide, spell 4, expand it, and now you have your 3rd or 4th, maybe 5th fork in the deck on a split card that is also a kill con if you explode. So that card still has ramifications and is definitely another card I will look into as this rotates. Otherwise, like you said, financially it's just kind of whatever. I had a bunch of Growth Spirals that I just tossed away in bulk because they're not going to go anywhere else. They're a common, unless they're foil or the promo version. That card's not going to see much financial movement moving forward. There's infinite of that card floating around.
Set was one of the last sets that you could draft, and it was drafted heavily.
Oh yeah. Like, and then like some of the odds and ends like Yoriel, Kenrith, they still exist in Standard, so it's hard to kind of want to buy in. However, Kenrith is a really interesting EDH general. The reanimation clause is quite interesting because the creature comes into play under its owner's control. So like, this is purely anecdotal, but at the table I was playing with, I had an Elves player and another player playing blue while I was playing Kenrith, and I just ramped out to infinity and beyond, and my elf player cast Allosaurus Rider into a counterspell, and then Craterhoof Behemoth into another counterspell, and I was 1 tutor short of being able to, on my turn, reanimate Craterhoof under my elf player's control to pump his team, cast Insurrection to take everything, and then Rite of Replicating his that Craterhoof and just blow it out. Yeah. But Kenrith is weird and shenanigan-y, and that, as a general in EDH, is definitely something I would look forward to. So if Kenrith falls out of favor in the meta from Temur Rec, that's a card I would definitely look into, like anecdote aside. Solar Blaze is also cropping up, which I find is kind of interesting. I know that's basically a Cyborg card, but I assume that's going to fall out immediately once Temur Rec goes. Because it's basically used against Sharks and Uro. And, the mono red and mono white decks. It's exploding it is really what you want to do against those decks, so you can just hit 3, it takes out, or all the white creatures essentially punch themselves. Any tokens they make are now on the battlefield before the original copy resolves if you explode it, and then it wipes out the rest of the battlefield.
Yeah.
And so you kind of lose a little potency with that card once Expand, Explode rotates out of the format. So all said and told, I believe there is some value. It's long-term, but it's going to be EDH and then Pioneer if they ever fix that freaking format.
Doubtful.
But absolutely agreed. However, every other deck that's in here, Jund Sacrifice, Mono Black, Mono White, Mono Green, the Mono Red decks, there's all opportunity for those decks to actually see play after Temur Rec rotates out of the format, because there is no premier aggro deck right now that isn't Mono Green, and even then it's kind of dicey because the white version of Temur Rec operates on a different axis than just Temur Rec with Jace. You can just keep bouncing their big threat. Put it back in hand, counter it on the way down, or make a big shark on your turn. So the financial aspects here are so like I said, long term, and then suppression, which is something interesting to think about. But
yeah,
I think that's where we are in regards to that. We touched on TCGPlayer Infinite, or no? Yeah, there it is.
No, we did not.
Okay, cool. So here we are.
Basically, TLDR on the announcement. TCGPlayer is taking articles off of their site, off of magic.tcgplayer. That's going to be strictly for singles and products. You can go now, the website's already updated, and they've got, here's all our new stuff.
Yep.
You can click, they have big boxes for the new products, and the article site is infinite.tcgplayer.com. Now, why is this relevant? So one of the reasons this is relevant is because compare this to Star City's website. Star City redesigned their interface and it's awful, but their articles are hosted on site. The big difference here is that if you ever click on an article on TCG or Star City, you notice you can highlight the card and immediately buy it. The reason that this can have an impact is because now you have to go through an extra step to get to the articles on TCGPlayer. So whereas before you'd see Hot New Standard and you're like, well, I don't really care about these articles, but I guess I'll just take a look at the deck lists. You scroll down, you take a look at the deck list, and you see, I need this card. This deck looks fun. Great. You click the card and you buy it immediately. That's awesome when it's all hosted natively on the site, like Star City. However, now, like I said, you have to go through extra steps to get it on TCGPlayer. Is this going to have a huge effect? Probably not. But it is something that you should at least be aware of when selling on platforms, and especially if you've ever gone through like Crystal Commerce or TCG, or one of those places where you can set up content creation and have linked articles, affiliate links, whatever. And maybe 5% of total TCG sales came from clicking articles. Yeah. Whatever. That's still a 5% revenue loss that you have to deal with now. So it's just something that I think is worth keeping an eye on. And at least for me personally, I would, all right, well, I guess I'll see what's going on here and maybe we'll find out what to do with it.
See, I'm of a slightly different mindset. To me, at the top level, this is a separation of concerns where you have your sales platform and your news platform separate, so you can separate them at the business level, and they can each have different revenue streams. You don't have to worry about one propping up the other, etc. You can do a little more business valuation there, and you can give yourself your own frickin' affiliate link if you want, so you can track sales coming over from your articles a little more clearly and a little better. So from a business standpoint, I like the changeover. From a customer standpoint, I dislike it for the exact same reason, where when you're clicking on a card on infinite.tcgplayer.com, as I demoed in the podcast, it just takes you to TCGPlayer or shop.tcgplayer.com, whatever it is, and it takes you directly to that page, at which point you can add it to your cart, and then you can go back to the article, and if you find another card you like from the article, it's the exact same process, and it keeps spooling into your cart, whether you're logged in or not. So that, I think, is great. Where I actually differ a little more is I think this might have more impact on sales in a positive way than a negative way. I do understand the revenue loss, but at the same time, I absolutely forgot that TCGPlayer had articles because they were just buried deep within the website.
Fair.
So when you break them out into the top level, it might bring a little more visibility, at least to the article side of things, which could lead to more sales overall, but it could still be a negative for the exact same reason that you brought up, which is that you've got to click something, go to another website, click something else. It's not a seamless experience. It might be in the future.
I'm lazy. I don't want to click.
I agree. If I'm buying something, the entire reason I would ever buy anything from an article off TCGPlayer was because it would spool into my cart there. Same thing with Star City. If I was reading something, I was like, I could use that card. It would just
add to cart.
Yep. So maybe in the future that functionality comes around. We brought up the top level article at the beginning, and you can kind of read through it and see that this was a redesign based on not laziness, but they didn't want to fall into the exact same pitfall that Star City did, which is attempting to overhaul the entire marketplace. They said, and rightfully so, as architects, that it would just be easier to draft another version of the article-based website and place that up. And they're both still at TCGPlayer.com. It's just different subdomains. So from an engineering perspective, there is the opportunity for those two portions of the site to talk to each other. But creating that webhook is just going to take some time to square up. And I assume it will happen. But right now they just rolled out, the MVP, the minimum viable product, which is just get the articles out and link.
Yeah.
And to me, that's fine, and I understand. It's the exact same thing that Star City did, but they tried to revamp the entire platform, which did not work well because they were still going to old.starcitygames.com for their old articles, for their carts, for the account info. It's like that just was not set up, that MVP, correctly. And so it was a horrendous experience up until a couple of weeks ago where they finally fixed the search functionality of the website.
Yeah.
So overall, I like this. I might actually read some more articles from TCG Player. And like I said, from a business standpoint, it makes sense. So I like the change overall. And because I never really did business through the articles with TCG Player in the first place, because I didn't really read those articles that often, this doesn't affect me that much. But I can understand where this either has a positive or a negative impact for sellers.
Yeah.
So overall, we'll see.
TLDR was pretty short.
Yep, exactly. And it looks nice. The flow is fine, and it's not going to hamper people from being able to move from the articles over to the sales side of things.
That's fair, yeah.
It's just I'm going to keep saying the same thing. Lazy people will not follow that, and that's you and I.
Yeah, exactly. As I sit here in my robe.
Yeah. You look fabulous. It's fine.
Thank you.
I was going to mention it off cast, but if you're going to bring it up, I'll lean into it.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Anything else?
No, I think I'm ready for picks.
All right.
You want to take it away this week?
I will start us off. So mine is from one of the sets that seemingly dodged all of the supply issues we're experiencing, and that's Core 21. And that is Animal Sanctuary Full Art. Why this card? Well, it's a casual EDH card. It deals with cats, dogs, and birds, and snakes, which a lot of people make decks around.
Mm-hmm.
It also deals with goats, which I have a personal soft spot for, as the original sketch for Mountain Goat is right there. And as some of you know, I collect. I just think that this is a great long-term casual EDH card. The low on the non-foil is only $1, which is 4 times low on the regular version, so why would you not get the better version? The foil is also only $4.33. Now, I think that this card absolutely gets reprinted in a Commander product, which is another reason I opted for the box topper.
Got it. Okay,
or
that makes
whatever
sense.
Instead, because this slides into so many decks that they can reprint at any time because they like printing cats and dogs. They love printing snakes.
Mm-hmm.
And birds are in most green decks.
There's also not Commander Isha. That's the mono white bird, Kanji.
Yeah, Kanji.
Kanji is a blue-white bird warrior, and so there are a lot of aggressive and taxing strategies based around that general that does use a lot of birds. So while not as popular as the other creature types, more so than ox and goat at least, there is a niche for this.
Yeah, and it also adds counters, which is of course something that a lot of people love to do in EDH. So I just think that if you can pick this up for $1 for the non-foil,
yep,
and even $3 to $4 for the foil, absolutely. I all day long.
I like this pick because my immediate thought was, oh, this is just going to be another Swarm Yard.
Yep.
And I've got Swarm Yard up now, and we can see that all this does is add a colorless mana and then regenerate either an insect, a rat, a spider, or a squirrel. And I think the most relevant creature type on that card still is squirrel.
Yep.
And all it does is regenerate a squirrel. But none of the cards you care about, I believe, that make squirrels are actually squirrels. They're humans.
Yeah.
Like none of these creature types are popular in EDH, but this card is powered by EDH.
Yes. And that's exactly the type of thing that Animal Sanctuary slides into. Mm-hmm. And obviously when Swarmyard came out, we didn't know EDH was ever going to be a thing.
Yeah.
And Now we know EDH is a thing, and Animal Sanctuary is just an incredibly good buy.
Yes,
I think at the price it's at for the full art.
I agree. It's insulated, which is awesome.
Yeah. Foil on the regular one is $1, which if you want to go that route, go for it, because they're not going to reprint foils in a commander deck of a land. I wouldn't think. Who knows? We could just get all foil commander decks one day. But super solid pickup. It may be a year or 2 years before it reaches the price you want. It may be 6 months. Because all of a sudden they may say, hey, we just stopped Core 21, so we could catch up on Jumpstart and Double Masters and everything else. So.
Yeah. No, agreed. I like this more than Swarmyard because Swarmyard, while relevant in terms of creature type, regeneration is strong, but not as strong as a +1/+1 counter. It seems innocuous, but between doubling season, parallel lives, anointed procession, and the myriad of ways to proliferate +1/+1 counters, I think this one is a little more powerful than the rest. It's the kind of card that you should be pairing with Seedborn Muse and untap effects like that, so you can get multiple uses of it out of a turn. So right now, the scope of this card might seem a little narrow to a lot of players because it's like, oh, it's just one token. How do I make this work? You got to invest in it. You got to actually supplement it with some other odds and ends. You can't just slide it in like a land that regenerates your pack rat.
Well, it's the type of thing that in the decks that are running, in a green deck, you're going to try to run something like a Seedborn Muse or a Wilderness Wreck or something like that anyway. So it just slides into that.
Exactly.
So it's, takes a land slot and doesn't cost you a whole lot.
Exactly. And like I said, I think right now it's just not being overshadowed. It's just not being looked at properly because it looks very narrow, but in reality it's not. You just have to find a way to make it not narrow. And that's when I think that this card will actually begin to rise, and it both in price and popularity is when people start seeing how it's being utilized, more properly than just once a turn.
Yep.
Right. My pick this week is actually based off of lack of movement from Jumpstart, and it is Keening Stone from Rise of Eldrazi in particular.
Yeah.
So Keening Stone, 6 for an artifact with an activated ability of 5 and tap. Target player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of cards in that player's graveyard. So what does this have to do with Jumpstart? Keyword mill. So when we look at EDH Rec for Keening Stone, we're going to find just a ton of mill and graveyard-based commanders, including Bruvac, who actually has moved up on this chart a couple spots since I wrote my write-up. And it slides into combo decks with Phaenax. You can use something like Eater of the Dead and a card called Night Howler from the original Theros block, which basically allows you to mill everybody out once you land both of them. It slides into Geth decks, which are just looking for graveyard synergies, because Geth can reanimate a creature from a graveyard, and it's just going to slide into something that is more kind of casual within a deck like Bruvac, which is mono blue, and relies on a card like Traumatized, Sphinx's Intuition, is it just literally Jace's Intuition, the new Sphinx's Intuition, and basically hard mill cards like that, and takes a more casual approach to mill in the fact that it doesn't combo out like Phaenax does, but you can just murk a player really quickly with mono blue. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, the way Bruvac and Traumatize work together. Traumatize says target player puts the top half of his or her library rounded up into the graveyard. Down. Yeah, one of them. Into the graveyard. So if they have an even number of cards with Bruvac out, they mill their entire library. If they have an odd number, they're left with one. While Keening Stone is effectively another mill card and will trigger twice, or you'll mill twice off of Bruvac. Now, the timeline on this that we have thus far for stocks basically does show an increase in price from Jumpstart announcement, but it has not come back to its all-time high, which is about $5 a number of years ago. And I think this card has 3 to 6 months on it at most before it just takes off, and the reason for that is, as we talked about this episode, the limited release of Jumpstart and the inability for players to pick up cards like Bruvac. That card has a $40 price tag right now, which for a very casual theme overall in EDH is really expensive. And that is a huge break point for people to get into this deck. As opposed to something like Phaenax, which has a $10 price point. So if you're limited on budget, you can buy Phaenax, slap that in as your general, and just play a more cohesive strategy overall and take a little longer to get the job done.
Yeah.
So I would expect when we get a second wave of Jumpstart, that's when everything for Jumpstart comes down, Bruvac drops, and then this is when people will move in a little more into Mill, and we'll see this casual theme pick up overall. And this is a card I would just kind of pick up and sit on into infinity, because again, like Angels and Dragons, this is another one of those themes that people just want to get into because it's nice and casual.
Yeah.
As far as buy list numbers go, this has been pretty solid on CK. They've been looking for 24 for a fairly long time. For Rise of Eldrazi, it's been on the buy list for a very long time. The number of vendors on TCGPlayer is slowly dwindling for Rise of the Eldrazi. There's under 100 left for English copy. Sorry, I can never remember how to phrase this properly. When you filter for English language, there are under 100 unique prices left. A little more for non-English, but we like to operate in the easiest to sell space.
Truth.
And the market price for this has basically been the same all weekend. Everything has risen, as you can see via the stocks graph, since I picked this card about a month ago. I've been keeping my eye on it. And I think now is the time to move in because that graph is still moving and it's still under $3. I think this is a $6 card in short order and closer to 10 in the long run.
So.
Until they actually make Commander deck Mill. I don't think we're going to see this card come back. That's the only other printing it has is Commander 2016, I believe, and it has yet to be in anything else since. Rise of the Eldrazi, so it has a set foil, and Commander 2016. Those are the three ways you can get this card. And then it's gone. Kaput.
And I think it's very much worth noting as well that this is, like you said, casual EDH card, which again, one of the only formats that is actually seeing any type of growth whatsoever right now is casual EDH.
Mm-hmm.
EDH in general.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be eternal. It will, honestly, probably outlast Magic at this rate. So it's definitely, I think, worth noting that something like this slides into that really, really digestible $2 to $3 buy-in that short-term turns into a double-up pretty quickly. And that's the type of thing that, you know, I can't tell you how many times, and I'm sure it's happened to you too. You're at a booth, at an event, and someone says, I need something for my mill deck. I need something for, you know, my cat deck or something like that. This is the type of thing that people will just browse around for. So if you happen to be, you know, somewhere where a store is, you know, has their tables set up, you can go there, hang out. Someone will browse your binder, see this card, and be like, that is a great fit for my mill deck. And there you have it.
That's how Traumatized sells. That's how it's always sold. Yep. Whenever, and Sphinx's tutelage for years, we would keep him in the case because it was modern playable being in Origins, but in reality, it was the most worthwhile mill card to put in your case that wasn't Phaenax. And even then, you wouldn't make room for Phaenax because it didn't see play outside of anything other than EDH. Sphinx's tutelage was at least a little more digestible by people. So, yes, absolutely.
It also had the added benefit of, you know, I never really knew this card existed, so I'm going to get it.
Yep.
And Keening Stone kind of has that same thing going for it, where it's from an older set, where some of the newer players may just not know about it.
Oh, yeah.
So you can get in and be like, hey, see this card? This is great. And all of a sudden, boom, they're in.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great point. The reason I picked Rise of the Eldrazi is because it is a much more narrow release than Commander. And then this is that's the point we love to harp on, which is just the moment you put eyes on something that's old is generally speaking when it takes off. And so now that Bruvac's here and just kind of reinvigorates, I'll put that in quotes, the mill strategy, that's what you're going to see out of stuff like this. I think Traumatized took a jump as well, foil and non from bulk to, you know, a number that isn't bulk. Yeah. And that's why, keyword mill.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's something you can rely on because we've already seen it start. This is basically the last little bit of product that hasn't been hit by that rising tide, so to speak. So that's where I am.
I'm about it.
So I think we are good for this week, correct?
Yes.
Yep. I think next week we have a little more to talk on in regards to TCGPlayer. There's another topic we wanted to hit on, but you got the messaging for that, and I have not yet. So
yes,
once I'm
waiting
able to read
for
through
some of that information to trickle its way out to the public, and man, I really wish there was an alternative to TCGPlayer. That's all I'm gonna say.
That'll be a very good discussion for us to have. But until next week, you can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and again, we don't need the like. We would appreciate the subscribe. We definitely want the comments and the feedback. And you can find we are everywhere that we have listed, and apparently in Magic Legends now at MtG Cabalcast, and including Patreon. And you can find me on Twitter at HaltIamReptar, and we can find you
at Thirsty Sizzler.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Yep. See ya.